of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, please conduct the roll call.
Banks.
Present.
Collins. Simmons. Tamayo. Reyes.
Present.
Guy. Akil.
Here.
Blair. And Ngandela.
Let the record show that all members of the Citizen Review Board are present, with the exception of Mr. Lincoln Tamayo, who has given notification. At this time, I will ask Vice Chair, Ms. Irene Guy, to read the meeting guidelines.
Thank you, Chair. Please silence all electronic devices. Cases that are brought before the Citizens Review Board are closed internal affairs cases that have been investigated and brought to the police chief for disposition. It is the Citizens Review Board's job to review the cases and render an opinion as to whether the investigation was done according to departmental policies and procedures. The Citizens Review Board members are provided the investigative files in advance of the meeting. Members of the public will have an opportunity to address the Citizens Review Board during the public comment portion of the meeting. At that time, speakers will be given 3 minutes to speak on matters related to the Tampa Police Department. If you wish to speak, we ask that you provide your name and address as well as a brief description of the topic. You can provide that information by filling out a brief form at the table just outside the doors to my left. The public comment portion of the meeting is coming up early on the agenda, so if you wish to speak, please sign in now. The chair will call the names on the list, so if you don't sign up to speak, your name won't be called. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guy. We now move on to item D, approval of the minutes from the meeting of June 22nd, 2021. Are there any questions or provisions? Hearing none, I will need a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
A motion to approve.
Second.
Ms. Irene Guy has made a motion to approve the minutes. Dr. Carolyn Collins has seconded the motion of approval of the minutes for the Tuesday, June 22nd, 2021 meeting. Any further discussion? We'll now continue with the vote. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. The motion passes. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item E. Are there any participants signed up for the public comment portion of this meeting?
I do believe I was told there is an individual downstairs. If we can figure out how to get the person at the kiosk, the monitor from downstairs up here, that'd be great.
Okay, as we get the participant direction to the kiosk, if you will, Vice Chair, you can go over some of the public comment meeting guidelines.
Okay.
Preferably the short version.
Okay, I thought I did that already, Chair.
Oh, okay. If you will, sir, please continue to state your name, your physical address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Are we ready?
Yes, sir. Please continue.
Okay, to the review board, my name is James Simmons. I live at 215 West Grand Central Avenue in apartment 1204. And I'm here to reference a assault that happened to me on a Hart bus line, on a Hart bus. And this assault happened on September the 13th, 2019. And for some reason, the state attorney's office sent me a letter postmarked. It's not dated, but it's postmarked on May the 25th of 21, saying this case has to be discontinued. Now, I was assaulted on a Hart bus, and I followed the suspect from the Hart bus to several locations around the city of Tampa. Eventually, I followed him to the men's room located at 306 East Jackson Street, which is the municipal building downstairs. Upon identifying this suspect from the bathroom, two of the Tampa police officers, one female and one male, the male officer, Klimkowski, took the suspect outside, interviewed him, and talked with him for about 5 or 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes, I guess, something of that nature, and released the suspect. This is the suspect that assaulted me on the bus. He was armed with a knife, and I'm the victim of the assault, and the police officer has no time to even address me and my concerns. He called two other officers to the scene to take a report. Now, this happened on September the 13th of 2019. I was interviewed by the state attorney's office, attorney Daniel Goldstein, and Mr. Eric Alvarez on September the 16th. A whole month and 3 days later, they called me in for an interview. They had none of the facts of the case, and because of that discrepancy in what was reported to them, I submitted a letter to the chief requesting that Officer Matt Klimkowski's police report be submitted to the state attorney's office. And because they had none of the facts of the case, I submitted a handwritten statement consisting of 2.5 pages to the state attorney's office indicating what the individual did, where he did it, and also how he disguised himself along the routes that he took, changing clothes, changing shoes, and disguised himself. Now, he was unable to get a bicycle from the bus. I prevented him from getting his bike. Otherwise, he would have been gone. The female officer at the time that he was in the bathroom at 306 East Jackson, she knew this individual. She said he was in there all the time. He referred to his bicycle as his bye-bye cycle. And if you look at page 3 of the report, I almost wrote bye-bye cycle, but it would have been a hearsay statement based on what was told to me, so I just spelled it out as bicycle. But there is no way a person that assaults someone on a bus is interviewed by the police and released. I understand that there was an arrest made in this matter. The wrong person was arrested. That person was forced to get an attorney, according to the private investigator that talked to me. And this person was arrested and then released, apparently. And I get a letter from the state attorney's office saying that it has to be discontinued. I have reached out to the Chief Dugan. I mailed him a letter from Michigan. I took a personal letter to his office at the police department downtown. I have yet to hear anything back from Chief Dugan, and I can't get in touch with the state attorney's office as to how to follow up on this matter. Now, I've spoken with several people within the state attorney's office, and one of the people stated that Tampa police really screwed up this one. That's a quote. I would like to know if this is police practice. I'm the one that was assaulted, and the person doing the assault was released without proper identification, apparently because he was never located. Now, this same person I happened to notice and observed on 4 different occasions within the downtown area of Tampa. The Publix there at Bay Shore, on 2 occasions, across the street from the Publix on another occasion, and in the pedestrian park on Ashley, just to the west of the Regents Building. Where do I go from here with this complaint?
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. If you will, Mr. Simmons,
I do
remain
have
at the-
copies for every one of the members if they would like. The letter that I wrote to the chief and the letter that I wrote to Mr. Andrew Warren's office.
If you will, Mr. Simmons, one of the board members, typically we do not engage in dialogue during public comment. However, we do not have that many participants this evening, so I'm going to allow Dr. Carolyn to ask one question, if you will.
Yes, I just wanted to ask you, Mr. Simmons, did you complete a complaint form with the district closest to where this occurred? What usually comes through us is through a complaint form and have on the back the phone numbers. I know you've done a lot of paperwork, but I just wanted to ask that. Where did he go next?
Mr. Simmons, you understand the question?
I didn't understand you. I didn't hear you.
Give me this pamphlet, sir. I'm the commander of the Professional Standings Bureau. Do me a favor, call that number tomorrow, and we'll give you your complaint.
Okay, is there anyone I should ask for?
Nope, just the detective on duty went to the phone.
Okay.
All right.
What hours would that be?
9 to 5.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. I will now ask whether there were any recorded comments received through the voicemail set up for this meeting in reference to public comment under item E. Oh, I apologize. Is there another participant?
I believe, I was told earlier there was just one participant downstairs, so
Do we have a sign-up
I'll
list?
verify that right now. There was nobody else downstairs? I'm sorry, there is one.
If you will, state your name, your full name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Sandra Zikri. My phone number. My address is 11718 Raintree Lake Lane, Tampa, Florida, apartment A, 33617.
And if you will, please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
I want to use the projector. I don't know how to do it.
Just place your information on the projector screen there.
Okay. Before I begin, I wanted to request a few minutes of your time to present correspondence between myself and the Tampa Police and evidence and research. It will be only parts and pieces of evidence. Let's see. Does this thing go up? How do I use it? I'm not sure how to move this thing up and down, but, well.
The information is fine. We can see it.
Okay, cool. So this is the letter from Internal Affairs to show you that the complaint has been closed. Let's see. The Tampa Police has confirmed to me last week that they are fully aware that there is delayed discovery rules in criminal law, as well as a state attorney in the Tampa office I spoke with. Last year, last year when the detectives were investigating, the state's office told the detective that there's no such thing as delayed discovery rules and nothing can be done on the count of forgery. Here in the email from Internal Affairs, they're asking for the report from a certified handwriting expert that confirmed my consent forms are all forged. So there is some awareness that clearly a crime occurred. The chief of investigations from Polk County called me yesterday and said to give him a call if he would like. I gave him a brief description of the case, and he stood silently and then said they need to interpret the law accordingly. I have messages between myself and Internal Affairs. I noticed that they begin to delete evidence I sent to them last year, and I still question as to, why are they doing that? Today I got a message from an attorney I'm working with. She has not only one, but now two handwriting experts confirming that I did not sign the consent forms. One of the reports has been finalized and emailed to me just about 5 minutes ago. I have 3 doctors who are legal experts share their thoughts on the case. Let me grab a chair real quick. Okay. One signed an affidavit. One provided a letter with their thoughts on the case, and one shared general thoughts, all which stated that this is criminal assault and the police need to get involved. This is a doctor here, as well as over here. This is a criminal case. Moving forward, our first reviewer here, she states what the general elements of informed consent, then goes into detail about how the hospital deliberately starts redoing and undoing medical records, and then they begin shutting off like certain monitors. Then she further states how, how after the administration of the medicine, my heart rate dropped dangerously low, and then there was no record, vitals after that. And here are, the vitals. You have the 20 millimeter dosage, and then that's my heart rate just going, down. And then after that, it's just blank pages. I do have a case study here, because case studies and medical literature are very important in these cases. So, there's an example of what's kind of going on. So then our second review.
Ms. Zickery?
Yes, sir.
Yes, if you will, please, if you can draw to a conclusion, we greatly appreciate it.
Well, sure. We could go ahead and discuss this. This doctor here clearly states that I was given a 20 millimeter dosage of this medication, which is a narcotic. The standard dosage is supposed to be 5 millimeters. This is the doctor. I do not see this appropriate behavior, and I have a lot of concerns, of this type of behavior. I'm almost done, I'm so sorry. Let's see, do we have a patient complaint? There's been several patient complaints, and specifically the doctor that I've dealt with, she's referring to, and she talks about how they almost overdosed her as well. I just don't see that appropriate, because if you're having other patients complain about these things in a similar matter, this is clearly, a public threat. And then, this is basic, law journals. This needs to be addressed. And then this is lastly, the Florida law, murder statute. And what we have here listed is that same medication that was used on me. This is unacceptable. I am going to forward the certified handwriting expert report, but something needs to be done. It's been a year, and this is just absurd.
Thank you, Ms. Zickery.
Thank you. Am I able to follow up or anything? Silence. Interesting.
I would now ask whether there were any recorded comments received through the voicemail set up for this meeting for the public comment portion.
No, sir, there were not.
I will now ask if the clerk received any written comments. That concludes the public comment portion of this meeting. We will now continue with the agenda under item F, review of investigation. Tonight, we will begin with case number 20F-006 involving an internal affairs investigation of the supervising sergeant following an internal affairs investigation of case 20F-004, which was sustained and reviewed by the Citizen Review Board last month. The sergeant was investigated for violations of MOR number 1701, supervisor responsibility, and MOR number 1807, failure to comply with departmental policies. And again, this is a follow-up from our June meeting, excuse me. You will, Corporal Katie Tenassis.
Yes, this was my case for investigation, and this is a disposition that was completed by Captain David Fernandez. On April 28, 2020, the Internal Affairs Unit opened a formal investigation into Sergeant Rhodes subsequent to investigation 20F-004, which alleged policy violations against Officer Joshua Jackson. Investigation 20F-004 determined, among other things, that Officer Jackson had stored property in his vehicle that should have been placed into property or evidence. The allegation referenced an alleged fake operation at the Gold Club and that Sergeant Rhodes was aware of the illegitimacy of the operation. He allegedly told the officers they could essentially blow money and have fun. While not all of the allegations were accurate, after a thorough review of all documentation provided by the Professional Standards Bureau, there is sufficient evidence to support sustaining violations of MOR 1701, supervisor responsibility, and MOR 1807, failure to comply, departmental policies, to wit, Intra-Division Procedure 303.07, Street Anti-Crime Expense and Informants Fund. The following are results of inquiries made by the Professional Standards Bureau. The operational plan for the Gold Club states, due to recent prostitution and narcotics complaints inside the Gold Club, undercover officers will attempt to make a deal with the entertainers for narcotics or prostitution. In order to ascertain where the complaints came from, we contacted Crime Stoppers of Tampa Bay, and they advised they received 4 tips in reference to prostitution at the Gold Club from June to December of 2019. However, the tips were closed as already known, not sent, and were not passed on to TPD. Sergeant Rhodes maintained his squad went to the Gold Club with the intent of gaining intelligence about a recent shooting and/or making felony narcotics cases. There was a shooting in Ybor City in which information about a subject who needed to be identified may have ties to a dancer at the Gold Club. However, the title of the operational plan did not reference the shooting. Upon reviewing the operational plan, it did not mention the intentions Sergeant Rhodes suggested, which were to locate a female who may have information on a person possibly related to the shooting in Ybor City. The officers under Sergeant Rhodes' supervision all stated the intention of the operation was to locate the female and get information regarding a subject involved in a shooting. However, all of the officers gave conflicting statements pertaining to the reason and title of the operation, which led to a misunderstanding of the objective. For the CAD calls, the officers were at the Gold Club for approximately 3 hours and spent $421 and yielded no results. The officers advised they spent money on the cover charge, drinks for the dancers, drinks for the friends, shots for a bartender, a pack of cigarettes, cover charge for the lap dance area, and 1 lap dance. Officers were not able to gather intelligence from the dancer on the subject who was involved in the shooting. No arrests were made and no NCIC checks were conducted. The investigation revealed Sergeant Rhodes issued Officer Jackson $300 on August 21st of 2019. On January 8th, 2020, Officer Jackson used $270 of that draw money combined with $170 of his own money to purchase custom 10-karat gold teeth. The draw was closed on January 8th, 2020, and $30 was returned. Sergeant Rhodes allowed him to have the draw open past the 90-day allotment in violation of policy. In addition, it is the responsibility of the requesting officer's immediate supervisor to conduct a monthly audit of the expense voucher and at the time of closure to ensure compliance with the 90-day rule. The IDP reads, "The purchase of supplies and/or equipment will be limited to exigent circumstances or an immediate need. Due to the extended amount of time the draw was open, which was almost 5 months, it shows that this purchase was neither exigent nor an immediate need." Sergeant Rhodes was the direct supervisor of Squad 331 and Officer Joshua Jackson. He allowed his officers to write operational plans without proper oversight and should have been more directly involved in offering guidance and direction. While he does have the authority to delegate tasks to subordinates, he cannot delegate responsibility. Undercover operations are very involved and dangerous. The supervisor must make sure all of the officers involved are on the same page regarding the operational plan and given a copy of the plan, which would allow them to individually review all the necessary information and, if necessary, ask the sergeant for guidance. The accuracy and completeness of an operational plan is not only imperative for the officer, but also the shift commander who approves and requires situational awareness of the operation. Sergeant Rhodes failed to effectively monitor and maintain the SAC draw and monies that need to be accounted for and restored to ensure compliance with the 90-day rule. Allowing an officer to use draw money to buy gold teeth was a poor supervisory decision, and it was not an immediate need, nor could the item be used by other officers if Officer Jackson left the squad. And Captain Fernandez wrote, "Based on a complete review of the investigation completed by the Professional Standards Bureau, containing the allegations brought forth, I conclude the investigation disclosed sufficient evidence to sustain violations of MOR 1701, supervisor responsibility, and MOR 1807, failure to comply with departmental policies, to wit, intra-division procedure 303.07, the SAC expense and informants fund." Sergeant Rhodes he did not have a complaint review board, and at the conclusion of this investigation, the chief's discipline was Sergeant Rhodes was removed from the SAC squad and placed on a patrol squad. He received a 1-day suspension, and he was not allowed to shift bid in the 2021 year. He was placed on a day shift patrol squad. Any questions?
Those were the only penalties?
I'm sorry.
Is Sergeant Rhodes, was he the only one that was penalized?
Yes, this investigation was into his supervisor responsibilities.
May I ask a question about the gold teeth?
Yes.
What's significant of gold teeth?
Sergeant Rhodes, in his interview, explained that he thought the purchase would aid Officer Jackson in making narcotics arrests, and that it would end up paying itself off essentially by all of the arrests that he would be able to make using a prop to aid in his undercover capacity.
So he was moved from the SAC squad.
Yes, he was moved. He was the midnight supervisor of the street anti-crime squad. During the investigation, toward the end, he was moved to a patrol squad on a midnight shift. At the conclusion of the investigation, he received a suspension and he was placed on a day shift patrol squad. He was not allowed to bid to his preferred squad.
1-day suspension.
I'm sorry. Okay.
I have a question. So, based on the corrective action taken for Officer Rhodes, based on your procedures, can he then, given a certain amount of time, rehabilitation, et cetera, can he make his way back to that same squad again, that same position?
That would be up to the chief of police. The street anti-crime squad is a specialty squad. The supervisors are picked for it, so if the chief said so, yes, he couldn't bid to that squad. He would have to be selected for it.
Okay, thanks.
And the Jackson,
Carolyn Collins.
I'm sorry. Jackson, the officer, since he was approved to do this and lack of supervision, that's why he is not being held accountable.
Yes, ma'am.
It's
So those
our- okay.
officers, yes, were working under Sergeant Rhodes' authority.
Okay. That's all I understood.
He did. They bought other props in the past, T-shirts and things like that, alcohol or cigarettes, something to blend in with whatever operation they're working. Sergeant Rhodes explained that he gave him a price limit, and that if he wanted to go above that, he had to pitch in with his own money.
my last question, is it normal for them to hold it out that long, since he held it out 5 months?
Oh, no, ma'am, it's 90 days. So that's what he was disciplined for. They have to close the draw, so they check out the money, they have 90 days to close that, and then they have an itemized receipt essentially explaining what every dollar is spent for. It was open far past the 90 days.
And that's not customary that it happened throughout the,
No, and when we did the investigation, I checked the other squads in that district to ensure the rest were closed. And my captain can probably explain a little bit more, but it's also been added to our quality assurance every month. We now send detectives out to audit the safes at the district and ensure that all of the SAC funds are accounted for within the 90
within
days.
the 90 days?
Yes.
Is there any record of other violations or investigations against any of those?
Yes. I know there are. I don't know them off the top of my head, but yes.
So the 1 day suspension was just for this, because since we got additional days for the other violations?
No, I'm sorry. I thought you meant in the past in his career. Yes, and in his career, he's had other internal affairs investigations, but this is just for this incident.
I'll add one thing. Captain Schoolmeester's Professional Standards Bureau. Part of my bureau is obviously internal affairs, where we investigate officers, but the other half is the body-worn camera program and what we call quality assurance. Every month, we do an audit of, just to say things that they should be doing, and we just want to ensure they're doing. I think you were each furnished a report. There's 13 categories on it, and with this, with the Rhodes case, number 12 of the 13 was created. So if we see a problem that, hey, we may need to take another look at it, then we do. So we audit everything from reports, make sure they're corrected and classified properly, to use of force, to body-worn camera audits. Like I said, there's 13 different categories that we go through.
You will, Dr. Collins.
Sorry, is that the quality assurance executive summary that we had?
Yes, that's
Okay, that
correct.
was- okay.
Detective Wise works for me.
Yes.
And she heads up that unit, and then she provides that report to me, then we provide to the Chief Dugan.
Okay, so I saw those 13. Thank you.
Any other questions for Corporate Katie Tenassis in reference to the case we're reviewing? The question before the board is whether we agree or disagree that the investigation and its findings were consistent with department policy and procedures. Any further discussion? Hearing none, can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Cyrene Guy has made motion to sustain MOR 1701, supervisor responsibility, as well as MOR number 1807, failure to comply. Reverend Banks has seconded the motion. Any further discussion? We'll now continue with the vote. All in favor specify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. The motion passes. If you will, Dr. Collins.
No, I agree with the sustained. I just want to mention that the penalty or the violation for 1 day suspension and moving them around just didn't look like it was enough for what he did.
We'll continue under item F of the agenda. We have an additional case upon request to review tonight, case number 20F-148, involving an internal affairs investigation into the use of derogatory comments used 4 times on 2 separate dates in violation of manual regulation number 1807, departmental policies, City of Tampa Personnel Manual B1.2, discriminatory conduct, and SOP number 536, professional responsibility and philosophy of enforcement.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Members of the board. I'm Detective DeGagney with the Internal Affairs Bureau of the Tampa Police Department. The case I'm about to review is 20F-048. These are allegations again, as you mentioned, sir. Tampa Police Department, B12, the subject officer was supposed to be in violation of this. So just to familiarize yourselves with the City of Tampa, B12, again, it governs discriminatory conduct. The policy is as follows. The City of Tampa is committed to equal treatment of all persons without regard to race, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, age, disability, familial status, or marital status. As part of that commitment, the city has forbidden its employees to use slurs, derogatory comments, or any other physical or verbal conduct directed at or based upon another person's race, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, age, disability, familial status, or marital status. Such incidents threaten the safety, security, and well-being of not only those against whom they are directed, but also who live and work here as well. They give the erroneous impression that the City of Tampa and its officials and employees do not accept the concepts of equal opportunity and treatment under the law. For these reasons, the city considered these incidents to be among the most serious violations of city policy which an employee can commit and deserving of serious discipline action to and including dismissal. The policy will be stringently and uniformly applied. The words and conduct treated in this policy have no place in the City of Tampa and will not be tolerated. Employees shall not engage in offensive verbal or physical conduct directed against an employee, a citizen, or any other person or member of the public based upon race, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, age, disability, familial status, or marital status. Employees shall not engage in such conduct at any time during working hours or any city premise. Employees are also forbidden such conduct while off duty if such adversely affects the employee's ability to perform his or her duties. All managers and supervisors are expected and required to ensure that this policy is fully implemented and vigorously enforced. Finally, violation of this policy shall be grounds for immediate dismissal in the absence of extenuating circumstances, but in no case shall the disciplinary action for the violation be less than a suspension without pay for 15 working days. The case is as followed. On 12/1/2020, Corporal Lindsay, as the school resource supervisor for District 3 of the Tampa Police Department, located at 3808 North 22nd Street. Part of Corporal Lindsay's duties as a supervisor is conducting random checks of his employees. While conducting a random video check on Officer Delvin White from 11/13/2020 starting at 22:23 hours, his body cam video did pick up Officer White leaving a high school off-duty job at a football game at the local high school that he works at. His camera was inadvertently activated. While the camera was on, it captured Officer White speaking to himself, saying, quote, "There's a bunch of N-words out here." Minutes later, the video shows Officer White on the phone, on his Bluetooth in his vehicle. He was on the phone having a private conversation with his wife, and again, makes another derogatory comment using the N-word, explaining something to his wife. The officer was in full uniform at the time. He's the only one in his police car, and he was operating a marked Tampa Police unit. The supervisor was compelled to bring this information up the chain. On 12/3/2020, Officer White was relieved of duty pending an investigation. During this time, Officer White advised his immediate supervisor that there is probably going to be another video of him saying the N-word. So he brought this information to his supervisor. His supervisor later located that video. It was an arrest of a student from 11/30/2020 at approximately 11:57. The video shows Officer White making an arrest of an unruly high school student. The high school student actively resists. During that resist, Officer White calls the juvenile the N-word on at least 2 occasions while making the arrest. That student was later interviewed by myself and Corporal Thanasis. The student did not remember him saying the N-word to him. However, he did say that he would be offended if he was called that by the officer. An interview was conducted with Officer White on 12/16. He willingly admitted to saying those words, but advised that he did not mean them in a derogatory way. The disposition concluded that Officer White was in violation and was subsequently terminated on 3/2/2021.
Any questions for Detective DeGatti? Prior to the incident, did Officer White have any complaints from the staff or faculty in reference to conduct or ethics or language or anything of that nature on
To the
file?
best of my knowledge, no, sir.
Obviously, this type of behavior is not accepted. This type of language is not accepted on any format. However, in the past, there were suggestions on having police officers in communities that reflect the demographics. And in that dialogue, they brought up very strong points of the advantages of having police officers that reflect certain demographics in reference to language, in reference to commonality and things of that nature, where residents will feel comfortable with officers that reflect the residents in a particular community, and will effectively decrease crime and gain the support and trust of those communities. With that being said, what type of challenge would that be in those type of communities if there was a certain language that is common amongst certain residents that may not seem derogatory, but may seem as regular language? And I'm very familiar with the word, but I also understand in this particular case, especially at a school with predominantly African Americans historically, I'm not sure what the demographics reflect today. And I also understand that not only the staff and faculty supported Devin White as he served as an officer there, but what type of challenge this may have in the future in other communities as we place officers that have the same demographics, share the same language, share the same culture, share certain similarities. Is that a challenge moving forward, in your opinion?
I'm afraid I cannot give my opinion here. I can only state the facts of this case, and that's really, and then the policy as well. That's all I can really say.
Dr. Carolyn Collins.
Just one question. Just the fact that the officer used the terminology on a consistent basis, apparently did not call an individual that, but he used it, body camera on his badge. When I read over it and saw the various different violations, I think I saw suspension, it was 3 violations before you get the termination. Would we see other cases in the past and in the future, that once this has been done in this fashion, the way it was done, that we would see termination. And I did see some other things that the officer had done, like 3 times, but it may not have been using the word. Does that validate, will that be consistency, and is it validated for the officer termination?
I believe there will be consistency. I can tell you confidently, in my over 18 years with the Tampa Police Department, I've not investigated or heard of any of the B-12 violations such as this. But I believe that, yes, they will stick to that standard.
And this is, and not for your opinion, this is the best violation, because they had, when I saw one of the policies, I think that you pass out in the meetings, I think I saw that when I did rounds. It's a descriptive information on what they ask officers not to do. So assuming he's had what would have been a written warning, I'm not too sure where we are, with verbal, but suspension had not occurred. It went straight to, and I understand when you read the policy up front, you said very strict, not going to tolerate hearing all that. I just want to make sure that once this is done, that we're going to be, as you said, consistent. And is that the best? I guess I'm trying to ask you about that being the best of the violations and the penalties that would be given to an officer in those times.
Captain Schoolmeester, Professional Standards Bureau. We investigate these cases. We don't render opinions, whether a finding of guilt, that is up to the captain that's over them, and then the discipline is ultimately decided by the executive staff and Chief Dugan. So we can't comment on future or past disciplinary issues. We have no part in that process.
Is this the first case of this type?
Of this case,
Is this the first case of this type?
no,
Okay, so there are others on the book already?
correct. This is a very serious allegation. First and foremost, we're police officers, and we're in the community, and we're judged as police officers.
Question.
Reverend Banks, if you will, please.
So if this is not the first case, is there from your information, has this, and I know you don't have any say-so in terms of the level of discipline, but has the level of discipline been consistent with the other cases?
I haven't looked at every case, so I couldn't answer that correctly.
Okay. That would be my concern in terms of level of consistency. If in fact this is going to be, if it's not a precedent-setting case because it's not the first. So the question would be, has it been consistently dealt with historically? So that
I
this is
can't
not-
answer that
No.
here and now because I don't have the historical facts of all the cases, but we could probably get you that information in past practices.
Okay.
Ms.
Yeah,
Simmons?
it'd be hard for me to render an opinion as to whether I agree or disagree based on just this information. I would like to know whether or not there's been consistency in application of the discipline as it relates to violating the policy. So that's where I'm with that.
When we look at the
Dr. Collins?
QA and the executive summary
Yes,
that
ma'am.
was presented, and we look at the 13 different criterias that were assessed, and I noticed the percentage, small or not, I like the fact that they were done. Is a case like this anywhere in these percentages so we could look at it and see in District 1, 2, 3, and in the, the special op division? Where would we find a case like this? And if not, is it feasible for us not to have names or whatever, but if we could see some kind of trendy data as to these kind of cases?
Well, these kind of cases is a rare case, and if an officer or my unit or supervisor, like in this case, found the video that we brought to our attention, then we would investigate it. But we do random checks. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of video, and I only have 3 officer to detectives assigned to mine that look at that, plus, a myriad of other categories. It takes them a whole month to go through everything. But we have systems in place to check, and not only on this case, but other violations as well, that those cameras reveal. So we do check them, and the supervisors do also check them, like in this case.
And again, besides this particular incident, there are no other complaints or violations on this particular officer?
So I don't know his history. I'd have to look that up.
Any other questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Just a procedural, on the recording, when I was reviewing this, and it said that he was recorded saying the word, it was inadvertent, I believe, inadvertently recording. Does the body camera sporadically come on and off, even if you turn it off, or how does that work?
No, it has to be triggered. What it does, there's two cases to it. You power it off, it's just works like a cell phone, but with a camera lens on it. So if you power it off, obviously it doesn't work at all. Or you put it in standby mode, which the officers are supposed to do. So if an event, a critical incident occurs, they either, like I said, I've explained before, there's certain triggers in the vehicle. If you turn on your lights, if you draw your firearm, or if you activate your taser, it'll send a Bluetooth message to your camera to turn on if it's in standby. Now, if it's off, it doesn't come on, but if it's in standby. But if the officer inadvertently turns it on, it makes a noise and it vibrates.
Okay.
So the officers are aware of that when it comes on. Well, they
Okay.
should be aware when it comes on.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, you were saying
If
about
you-
the prior violations, you mean at the school, right? Because we got the report that showed
Yes, at the
at the school.
at the school.
Thank you.
Being a resource officer. Any further questions?
If the officer had not spontaneously admitted to the second video, would that have likely come up in an investigation?
Yes.
Well, I agree with Reverend Banks that this is not.
If you will, Ms. Simmons, if you can speak into your microphone, please.
I agree with Reverend Banks that this is not the first disciplinary action on this type of B12 discriminatory policy. It would be helpful for us to know how the previous cases were handled, or incidences, should I say, were handled.
How challenging would it be to receive such information in reference to, we can make a comparison and contrast in reference to this particular case and other cases that's similar?
Not challenging at all. We just run a report on that specific violation into our database, and it'll tell us what officers in the past that violated that policy and what their discipline was.
Dr. Collins? Ms. Guy?
Thank you, Chair. I think more than anything is this is an editorial comment on my part. This is obviously was a good officer. Lots of people said great things about him, but he knew it was a violation. He knew what the violations were. And it's not like an officer goes, well, this violation may do this or this to me. This was a violation that was one of the most serious violations that he knew. And he knew when he was confronted with it that he'd done it before, and he confessed to that. So he obviously knew this was serious, and whether the offense was treated as every other offense in the past, I'm not sure that's something that that's not what we are here to determine. He was taken off duty, and he's no longer with the police department, and that was one of the consequences of violating this. And so my opinion is, and it's only my opinion, that if you know you're violating a rule, then you have to suffer the consequences, and that's what we've got here. Unfortunately for this officer, it was a consequence of this rule.
Thank you, Ms. Guy. Dr. Collins?
I'm more or less understanding Ms. Guy, and I hear where she's coming from. My biggest concern is if this is rare, it doesn't happen that often, and we commend TPD for making sure that they stay on top of the officers so that does not happen. But if it is rare enough, if we can, and we've kind of asked for this in the past before, it would be helpful to me when we say that, you know, this was sustained, it was the right thing to do. It would be helpful to know that this only occurred X number of times, and in every instance, the individual was terminated. How many times it happened, we have nothing to compare it with. So for me, regardless of what has happened, it would be nice if there was some trend information, some statistical data, any kind of thing like that that we could look at. And so this would be a case where I would be more willing not to vote no against it, but to ask that next month if we just could see what kind of trendy information, if that's enough time, so that we would be able to go ahead and say, yes, we sustain this. I think it's the wrong thing to do. I think the policy is the right policy to have, and we need to make sure that the officers are complying with it. But I need to know if this is, and I'm not saying it's not, but is this consistent with what happened in the past, that somebody did this 4 times and they were terminated rather than they were suspended? And I hate to use it as a correlation, but I would correlate it with the case that we just looked at with a 1-day suspension and moved to a night shift and things like that. So that's what I would be looking at. What is this in comparison to? How do we compare it? Yeah. Not questioning the judgment, but just making sure that we're using, I would call it apples and apples comparisons.
I think the panel has expressed favoritism in reference to a violation was performed. And I believe disciplinary action is applauded. However, it seems to have some controversy in whether the disciplinary action is in pattern with incidents like this in the past. If I'm not mistaken, that's the question that we do not have the information on in front of us today. Any other questions for Corporal? Any further discussion?
I have a question for you, Chair.
Yes.
This particular case was sent to us late, and we were told that Chief Dugan asked us to review this case. And I'm just curious as to why the chief wanted us to review this case, if there's something I'm missing. Does anybody know the answer to that question? Did I misunderstand that this was sent to us by the chief? I don't know the answer, that's why I'm not answering.
And when you answer that question, this case that we have back here in the back where it says the chief also requested, it appears, some officers to go back and look at this too with that review board. Help me understand that one, because I thought it was us, but then when we look at the end of it, we see the captain, lieutenant, corporal, and the MPO that actually
Reviewed it?
reviewed it as well. So I kind of have that same, if you can give us both the answers to that, that would be
I'm not sure I can answer the second one,
okay.
but, and even the first one's a little tough too, but, so, I don't want to speculate as to why the chief wanted to add this on, but I can certainly tell you that the request was made to add this case on. He wanted to get your input and insight as to what you thought about it, because obviously the decision was made for termination, the B-1-2 violation was there, and recognizing, you know, these are tough circumstances, but we have a strict policy. And, you know, how do you enforce you know, the policy says what the policy says. So the chief made the call that was, he felt necessary. And he just felt whether the board reviewed it and had any comment. He was willing to hear from the board. And I think it's as simple as that, whether you had any comment upon hearing this. I don't think there's any more or less than that to it. He just wanted to see if the board had any comment about this difficult situation. And as
Thank
far as
you.
the second question, I'm not sure I know what you're referring to, so I can't answer that, but
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt.
Dr. Collins, sorry, Detective Gagnon again.
Detective
What you're seeing is a complaint review board. So what officers can do is to try to, they put a board together. They can pick a few of the members of this board, and the city also picks members of this board. They all get together, like you guys do, and discuss the violations and see whether they agree or not with what the punishment should be. So it's just part of our union agreement, and again, it just has other eyes looking at the violations.
Thank you.
The question before the board is whether we agree or disagree that the investigation and its findings were consistent with department policy and procedures.
I would like to say that there's a portion of this that's consistent, and there's a portion that the procedures we can't answer. So if it's possible for us to get the trended data, statistical information on how this has occurred within the department at the next meeting, and that we vote on it at that time. That's just my opinion.
You want to state that in the form of a motion?
I was kind of saying it before we go to a motion, but I'd make a motion that we defer our vote until next month at such time we get statistical data that will help us make a decision.
Second.
Can I ask a question, Chair?
Yes, Dr. Carolyn has made a motion to defer the vote until statistical data is available to make a determination upon a vote, if you will. Ms. Irene,
Mr. Chair.
with your question.
Mr. Chair, if I can just,
Mr. Brody.
yes, Carl Brody, counsel for the CRB. You do have a couple options here. If we follow the strict requirements of this ordinance, then really our responsibility here is to review the facts that were brought before you and make one of three decisions: concur, not concur, or not able to reach a decision. Those are really the options that you have before you in terms of what the ordinance provides for. Now, if you want to make a procedural step that will allow you to continue the matter to the next meeting based on the concerns you have for the additional information you want to receive, that is an option. But really what was provided to you today was what's supposed to be provided to you consistent with the ordinance. The board is supposed to make these decisions, and they're tough decisions. There's no doubt about it. The board is intended to make these decisions not considering outside factors, but considering the factors that you heard today in terms of the facts that were provided for you by the law enforcement officers. So I'm not here to tell you what you have to do. I'm giving you your options and just letting you know what the ordinance is intended to require. So
Since we discussed, I have a question.
Dr. Collins.
Don't leave it, Attorney Brooke. When I looked at the information that you guys forwarded us, the 16 pages or whatever, I actually had that down there. I think that's under page 6. That's kind of like one of our new findings. That's under G1C, we can concur. We can say we do not concur, or we're unable to reach a decision. So if that be the case, I have no problem withdrawing my motion and going with C under our new findings if we're under those restrictions currently as they are, and going with, make a motion that we're unable to reach a decision.
I think that's the right thing. Well, let me say, you are under these rules now. This ordinance passed over a month ago, so these are your new rules, and one of the things we'll be doing is, in the next few meetings, is going over all these changes more specifically so that you can feel a better comfort level. But
But-
yes, those are new
but-
rules that you're under.
But if I do that, are we still permitted to ask for some statistical data
Absolutely,
that can come back, so at least we'll know where we are?
absolutely,
And in the future, we'll be able to make a decision.
yes.
If you would, Ms. Simmons?
I think this guy is next.
No,
Okay, okay, so, yes, a great point, thank you, Attorney Brody. It says that we can choose, under, G3, GC, we can say, unable to reach a decision, but specify the reasons we're unable to make a decision.
Right.
So we could, if I'm understanding you correctly, we can specify the reasons we're unable to make a decision and also ask for that additional information, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right, fair enough, thank you.
My understanding of the ordinance is that we look at policy and procedure. It does not say anything about disposition. And we've discussed many times on these cases where we didn't agree with the disposition as far as what the punishment was, or if we didn't think it was severe enough. But in this particular case, you may disagree with the punishment, but the police department followed their policies and they followed their procedures. And that's really what we're voting on. If I'm incorrect on that, Attorney Brody, would you correct me, please?
I mean, disposition is a factor in the decision that you make, but it's supposed to be limited to the 4 squares that's provided to you in the documentation you receive ahead of time and in the presentation that you receive at this meeting. So you do factor in disposition, yes.
Okay. I stand corrected. Thank you.
Now that is part of the new ordinance that we're going to go over more down the line.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
If you will.
obviously,
Thanks.
if this case was referred to us by the chief, then obviously he wanted to hear what we had to say about it. And of course, we come diversified on this board. We see things differently based on our experiences. And I think the chairman mentioned some of those differences when he mentioned his opening comments about the case. So there again, my concern would be, is a no tolerance for using the word, is that across the board? Or is there some understanding that you can have someone that uses the terminology in a quote-unquote racist way, and you can have some people based on our culture use it in a non-racist way? Has the policy been uniformly applied, or is it, because I'm just saying that if that information is available to us and we see that this is no tolerance, zero tolerance, each case when this situation occurred is consistent across the board, I'm good with that.
I understand your concern, and the purpose of these hearings is to provide that direction to an extent, but to provide it within the context of the matter that's before you. So it's kind of an outside question of whether it's consistently applied. It's a very important question. I'm not saying it's not important, and that might be a request I think that Ms. Collins, Dr. Collins asked for earlier. That might be a separate question than whether the outcome of the decision by the police department was correct in this situation.
From my perspective, the fact that the chief referred the case, obviously he's interested in something that goes beyond the 4 squares, because this case has been reviewed in the community, and there are some opinions about it one way or the other. But there again, if it's something that he wanted to get an honest opinion as to whether or not progressive discipline was an option, or has that been an option in the past, or going straight for the jugular was appropriate, or whatever. There again, I know that's outside of our purview in terms of disposition, but obviously the process in terms of the investigative process is black and white. It's right there. But there must have been some insinuating reasons why he wanted us to comment on it.
Yeah, I can't really speak to that.
I know, I'm
but-
putting it on the record so that
Okay.
that's how I'm looking at it from the perspective. it was a black and white case from the investigative perspective. Why is there a need to get additional comment unless there were some broader issues that he was interested in hearing about?
Thank you, Reverend Banks. Dr. Collins?
I'm at a point where I'm willing to withdraw my motion if the second of the motion is willing to accept that and make an additional motion to be consistent with the ordinance that we are currently under.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I withdraw the motion with a second, and then may I make another motion, Mr. Chair?
If you will, Dr. Collins?
Thank you, sir. I'd make a motion that consistent with our current ordinance, that I make a motion that we use the third option, that we're unable to make a decision because of a request or a need for additional information that we would ask be provided to us so that we can provide that decision at perhaps next month's meeting. And that's the statistical significance of what we're asking about. Let us see what's been happening from a trending perspective, same thing. So, unable to make a decision. Specifically, what we're asking for is additional statistical information to afford us that opportunity.
There's a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Can we do that as a motion? Because I think we're supposed to vote, right, on one of the three options. I don't think it can be a motion, right? But we have to vote, we either agree or we disagree.
We concur. we do
Attorney
not
Brody,
concur.
give us some direction on the new
Yeah.
ordinance
Yeah,
and
I
what our
think-
options
I'm
are
trying to read.
Absolutely.
in reference to the motion.
The best route is to have the up or down vote on one of the three options, and then you're absolutely free to make any motions consistent with more information that you're interested in receiving. However you're interested in receiving that subsequent to or after having
So are you
the up and down vote.
Are you suggesting that we just say unable, I make a motion that we're unable to make a decision, reach a decision at this time?
I think that's the best route, yes.
Okay, then if we can do that, then I second.
So we do have a motion on the floor in
I made a
reference to the
motion. She
third
seconded.
option. Dr. Carolyn Collins has made a motion in reference that the panel is unable to reach a decision based on the information at hand. Ms. Bermicha Simmons has seconded the motion. Any further discussion of the motion that's on the floor?
I need a clarification. Are we making a motion to vote a certain way before we would either say nay, yay or nay? And that was, I mean, we've never done it as a motion before. We've just he has gone through what the options are, and you voted for that option.
Okay.
Is that different now?
No, well, it's really just an issue of process, which way you desire to move forward on it. A motion officially places it on the table for consideration, but if the chair brings it directly to the board to make a determination about which route they want to take, that's fine. Either way, you get to the same outcome, which is one of the three options is chosen by a majority of the board.
That's true. It is the same outcome, but each member of this board has a responsibility to vote.
Yes.
And if you have a motion on the floor that only gives you one option, then that's the option we all would have to take, or abstain.
No.
What would happen is you're all, whatever motion you receive, let's assume we're going to go forward with the motion. You vote on that motion, and every member of the board would have an opportunity to express their position on that motion. If that motion fails, then you can bring another motion, or the chair can bring forward one of the other options to either concur or not concur, or not be able to make a decision at this time.
And unfortunately, I'm at a disadvantage because I read these, because I asked for them last week and they sent them to me. And when I read them, I did not realize that we would be able to say it now. So what we've been saying is we sustained or we not sustained or whatever. Now we can say we concur, we do not concur, or we're unable to make a decision.
Correct.
This is not part of the motion, it's just some of the discussion. I think what the chief apparently asked for us, as he did this other review with these individuals that I saw gave an opinion, he's simply asking us to render a decision on this particular case. And I think we are sending the chief a message back if we say we cannot make a decision. And afterwards, we specify that we want some more information and what we want in that information. Then the chief understands what we're asking for.
Correct.
That's what I'm under the impression. So if I'm wrong, if I vote for it and someone else is against it and they vote against it, then they have that option to make another motion if it doesn't pass, or to vote against it if they do occur. They just vote no.
Correct.
If I vote that I can't make a decision, I vote yes. So it's up to each one of us to make our own decision and make our vote. And if the vote failed, then someone else make a motion.
Right, for each,
And if that one failed, then somebody else make a motion.
for each one, yes, you need a majority of the board to approve any motion, and discussion and each individual board member's opinion will be provided, and board members will make a decision from there when they make their final vote.
So
And there's no, just because one of the motions is on the floor does not mean it automatically passes. It has to be approved by this membership.
Thank you, Attorney Brody.
And I think regardless of what decision you make, you're going to make a decision and it's going to be heard. So that's not going to be a problem.
Thank you, Attorney Brody. I call for the question.
There's currently a motion on the floor that will continue with the vote, and the results of such vote will determine where we go from there. The current motion on the floor made by Dr. Carolyn Collins is that we're unable to reach a decision unable to reach a decision. And Demetria Simmons has seconded the motion of unable to make a decision. We will now continue with that vote. All in favor specify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
I'm abstaining.
If I hear it correctly, I understand there's one nay and one sustain.
Who voted nay?
That was me, Gandela.
Okay.
The motion passes.
Now I'd like to, Mr. Chair, now I'd like to ask, since we've said we can't make a decision, I'd like to then not make it as a motion unless we need to do that, but to ask if we got, I'd like to make a motion that we, I'd like to make a motion that we ask the staff to come back and present us with some statistical information in cases like this over a period of time within TPD for assurance, so that at least we'll have some information.
Right, and what we really want to see is, if I'm understanding correctly, is the discipline for the B12 violations. That's what we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Carolyn has a motion on the floor in reference to the request of statistical information supporting the disciplinary action of the B1.2 discriminatory conduct. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Reyes has seconded the motion. Any further discussion? We'll now continue with the vote, with the motion on the floor. All in favor specify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say so by saying no. That motion passes. I believe Captain Schoolmeister as mentioned earlier that wouldn't be a challenge presenting us with that type of information. We will now continue with the agenda. Moving on to item G, Community and Tampa Police Department matters.
Yes, sir. If you'll bear with me 1 second, this computer is not cooperating, so just 1 second here.
I've now captured your password.
What's that? It's not going to cooperate with me. So I apologize, the computer is not reading the flash drive, which we have our PowerPoint on. I have another way to pull it up, so I am going to get it pulled up here in just 1 second for you to discuss our new behavioral health unit that we are launching at the Tampa Police Department. And they make the screen so small that it's impossible to see on here too. So. There we go. And let me just pull it up real quick. Fortunately, this has been emailed around, so I can pull it up through my email as well. Very good. I appreciate your patience. I believe we're ready to proceed. So I apologize. Thank you for your patience and indulge me on that.
You're quite welcome.
Well, good evening, Board. I'm Lieutenant Kurt Royka. I've been with the Police Department for many years, and I now head up our behavioral health unit at the Police Department. And so tonight I'd like to walk you through how we started a year ago, where we're at, and how we're going to move forward with this unit. So about a year ago, we decided to partner with, first off, we listened to the community. We realized that there was, and we looked at our data and realized there was a need to create a unit of officers and some mental health professionals to go into the field to help us with some of our crisis calls that we respond to. Realizing that we're not the professionals, we enlisted the help of USF, Dr. Kathleen Moore, and we also enlisted the help of the Crisis Center, Ms. Clara Reynolds, to help us come together to put this forward. As a result of that, we put out an RFA, request for applications, from different agencies saying, we would like to see your proposals on what this program would look like for the city of Tampa. Nobody responded to our RFA. However, we did receive a letter from Baycare. Baycare, and it was signed on by all of the providers that you see on the screen, Grace Point, DACO, Northside, and ACTS. And they said, listen, we don't want to act individually. We want to come together collectively to help you create this unit for the city. So that was a great step in the right direction. So earlier this year, we started meeting collectively as a team, and we did some ride-alongs with Grace Point and DACO, Northside, and ACTS, so they could see the challenges we have, and we could understand a little bit more about what they do in the field. And we came together, and as a result of that, we have a plan to move forward with a team. So the team is going to be headed up by myself. I am the supervisor of the unit. Dr. Kathy Thompson is going to be our clinical specialist, if you will. She's going to be the behavioral health coordinator for the department. It'll have 4 case managers that'll be contracted out to ACTS, which I'll talk about a little bit more in detail. And then we have 4 field clinicians that are going to be also contracted by ACTS, and then we have 4 TPD officers assigned to the unit. So this is a co-responder type program. We looked at many different programs across the nation. So we considered programs from Oregon, we considered programs from California, Texas, Oklahoma. We looked at programs around our area, both Pinellas County, Pasco County, Hillsborough County. And we came together and we said the co-responder model would be the best solution for us. And that was an agreement that was reached by all the providers, which means that we'll have a licensed mental health professional riding with an officer
who will then respond out to calls for service related to behavioral health issues. They'll also do follow-ups. So when we come in contact with somebody who has been Baker acted, obviously one of the biggest challenges is making sure they attend their appointments, making sure they stay on their medications, making sure they stay on track, because we want them to be better. We don't want to have to go back out for another call. So we have the co-responder model where they will go out and do follow-ups as well for these clients to help keep them on track. This will cover both mental health and substance abuse as well. We realize there's a comorbidity between the two, that oftentimes that mental health is not just mental health, there's substance abuse, or substance abuse is not just substance abuse, there's mental health issues attached. So we're going to attack both of those issues at the same time. Again, these trained clinicians who will be licensed, they'll be able to do Baker Acts, they'll be able to do assessments in the field. They'll be partnered with one of our officers. They will take the lead. The clinician will take the lead when they go out on these calls. Our job will be scene security and to make sure everything stays safe while the clinician does their job in the professional setting of evaluating the individual. They will become a team. So we envision the officer and the clinician, they're one-to-one. They won't be swapping out every day. They'll be assigned to each other, and they'll become a cohesive team moving forward in the future. Beyond that, we'll have a case manager embedded in each one of the 4 receiving facilities. So we have Northside, DACO, Grace Point, and Axe. The benefit to that for the city and for the police department and the community is this. It's a warm handoff. Instead of us just Baker acting and sending somebody over to Grace Point, which is where they go in their Baker acted, we'll have somebody embedded inside that we can make contact with immediately inside the facility to make sure that when we deliver a client to the location, that they can start providing them immediate services that they need instead of getting them into a queue through Grace Point. So it really helps them get to the front of the line when we deliver them to the facility. There's also the tracking of this person that we'll have through the case managers at the facilities. So what we did, we entered into an agreement with Axe. Axe was the provider that stepped up and said, we're the ones that want to take on the contract for you. So they're the ones that are going to provide the 4 licensed clinicians. They'll be contracted through Axe, assigned to the police department. They'll be full-time employees, again, through Axe, but assigned to work with us. Axe is the sole provider on this. They're going to subcontract out the case manager's force to the other facilities. So we only have one contract that we have to work through. And again, here's just some ancillary things for you to look at. We have the monthly payment. They'll go directly to them. We pay them for their services every month. Just some generic things for you to look at there on the screen. So the scope of work that they'll be doing, Axe, again, lead agency for the pilot, responsible for finding clinicians, the case managers, and subcontracting out to the other agencies as necessary. And so at this time, what I'd like to do, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Kathy Thompson. She is our licensed mental health counselor who is our behavioral health coordinator, and I'll let her explain her role and introduce herself as well.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Like Lieutenant Royka said, my name is Dr. Kathy Thompson. So my PhD is in counselor education and supervision. I am also a licensed mental health counselor here in the state of Florida, a national certified counselor, and a certified clinical trauma professional. In addition to mental health, I also have 17 plus years in community service, child welfare specifically, here in the state of Florida. So I'm pretty much have dedicated my entire life, my career in serving the community. So I'm very excited to come alongside with the police department and actually connect our citizens, our clients, if you will, that's kind of the language I'm used to the services they truly need and to prevent some of this recidivism, and also to get law enforcement doing what law enforcement does best and what they're trained to do, specifically violent crimes and investigations, and let mental health go ahead and take the lead on some of these issues.
Thank you.
So before we get into some of the numbers there, just a couple more finer points about the program. We have 4 teams. So we have 4 officers and 4 clinicians. It'll be 4 teams. They'll work a Monday through Thursday or Tuesday through Friday schedule. We'll have one on days and one on evenings. So we'll have most of the days covered. This is a pilot program, so we realize we don't have 24-hour coverage. We anticipate that the numbers will show that there would be a need to increase the number of officers and the coverage times, but we have to start someplace, so this is a pilot, so we're starting with 4 teams only. The budget for the year is roughly $800,000. A large part of that is to contract out employees from ACTS, and the rest of it would be for internal hires as well as other equipment that we would need to have to make this program work. So that is a broad overview of the program. Any questions?
Yes, I've got a question. Thank
Mr.
you.
Reyes?
Question for the doctor. So under the mental health coverage, what is your and your team's scope of experience in the areas of PTSD and military sexual trauma, or just sexual trauma? Just curious.
Like I said, well, for myself, I am I'm a clinical certified trauma professional, so I have specialized training in trauma, which encompasses PTSD, crisis intervention, and the like. And in my child welfare experience, I have also encountered lots of families and children specifically who have had sexualized trauma. As far as clinicians, honestly, we have not hired our clinicians yet, but that is definitely something I am very poignant about. So if that is not as a part of the repertoire, if you will, it will be definitely a training that I insist and that we continue to do. Trauma is pretty much the root of both mental illness and co-occurring disorders, the substance abuse. So it's very common. It's definitely established in research. So without an understanding of trauma, I don't believe that we would give everyone the best services we possibly could.
So the reason why I mention that to you is that here in Hillsborough County, we have a very robust Veterans Treatment Court. And Hillsborough County, as you probably know, is the most populous county in our 67 counties with the most veterans and the military. We've been very successful in our problem-solving court, but in the Veterans Treatment Court, we see a lot of mental health related, and as you said, comorbidity, because they're all tied together. And so because of that, I have, as the mentor program coordinator of the Veterans Treatment Court, I have a vested interest in making sure that we continue our synergism. We work, and I took note, and I'm very happy to see your strategic partners here, because pretty much all of them we work with at the Veterans Treatment Court, to include Clara Reynolds, who's a great friend. So I'm very excited to see that. What I'd like to see is that continued synergism at our community level, and then at a certain point at the state and the federal levels, that's going to, at some point, going to intersect as well. So I wish you the best on your pilot program.
Dr. Collins?
Yes, and looking at the comorbidities that he just alluded to, when we look at it, particularly with mental health, and you look at your clinicians and you start hiring, will you be looking for someone that have a piece of that comorbidities as it relates to some kind of medical, clinical, because of the overlapping, and I'm thinking about the many people that actually are having some other problems that are tied into mental. It could be, diabetic crisis or something to that fashion. Will you be looking at those kind of clinicians, or would it be strictly behavior and substance abuse?
I'm not sure I understand your question completely.
When you look at comorbidities, and let me come off of comorbidities. I was going to double back because it seems easy. When you look at other medical diagnoses that concur with substance abuse and mental health, when you begin to look at your clinicians, will your clinicians, case managers, et cetera, be individuals who might be able to discern the difference or collaborate the same when you are looking at a person that's substance abuse and diabetic, or you're looking at, and that's what I'm trying, will you be able to pull that medical piece in addition to the mental health? Because sometimes they get confused or sometimes they get overlooked, and that tend to be the problem.
I believe I understand your question in that the behavioral health unit will primarily focus on behavioral health. So it will be the mental health and the substance abuse. That's what we're looking for in our clinicians. However, if you look at the providers, all of them have either connections or experience directly in their organization with understanding how to also apply and understand and evaluate the medical side But our clinicians directly having medical experience, I do not believe that is a top tier that we are looking for. We are more so relying on our providers to do that piece, but we are not going to ignore it.
That's the answer.
Ms. Irene Guy?
Is the TBD dispatcher going to be the determination point, who they dispatch? And if so, are they being trained to determine how to dispatch the officer with the mental health professional?
Great question.
Great question.
So, realizing we have 4 teams for the city, and we go from Port Tampa all the way up to county lines, so it's a large geographic area, right? If a mental health call comes in, they will ask on frequencies, all the frequencies, is there a mental health team available? We call them BH unit, behavioral health. Is there one of those units available? If that unit is available, they will be dispatched and respond to that call. However, though, because we only have limited teams at this point, there's a chance they're going to be out on a follow-up, or they might be on another call, and if they're not available, then a regular patrol unit will take that call for service. Something else that we've done is that we've set up a queue. So our queue means that when a report is written, it goes to a certain area for somebody to review. So all Baker Acts, regardless if my unit generates it or a street officer generates it, we will read every Baker Act that comes in. So we will automatically know to follow up with those. We'll triage those reports to see which ones we need to follow up on immediately, see which ones might not meet the criteria that we're going to establish for follow-up. So I'd love to say that we're going to respond to every one. At this time, though, I don't think I'd have the staff to be able to respond to every mental health call. We're going to make every effort to. I just can't guarantee we will.
I clearly understand that. I just have a follow-up question. This is a pilot, so
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
already started. At least they said so on Channel 8 today, which is a very nice story, by the way.
Thank you.
So is there a time frame that has been set up? Today, the pilot started. Is there an endpoint or?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank
For the pilot, it's right now it's a 1-year pilot. We have a 1-year contract with ACTS. So at the 1-year mark, we'll reevaluate where we're at and see what we need to do to make the unit more robust, how to grow the unit if necessary, but all that will happen over the course of the year. We're going to be tracking data. That's part of Dr. Thompson's responsibility, is to track the statistical data that we need to be able to show the results of what we're doing. Ultimately, our goal, if I say there's a couple of goals, number one is we want to tear down the silos. Sir, you mentioned some of the challenges in court with some of our veterans, right? We want to tear down some of the silos that keep the different agencies from working together. That's one of our goals. Another goal is to make sure that we don't have recidivism of Baker Acts, where officers have to go out to the same house over and over. That is a huge goal of ours. And I'd say the ultimate goal for us is to reduce deadly force encounters when it comes to mental health crisis. It's an unfortunate reality. We never want to have that happen again. So if we can stop that with this unit, I'd say that's our ultimate goal. So everything that you're talking about, we're on track, and we're going to measure it over the next year to see what we can do during this pilot program.
Question?
Very well, Mr. Reverend Banks.
Those inmates existing that have mental challenges, is there something going on inside already to deal with those issues? I heard something on the news today.
You're talking about the ones that are currently either in Hillsborough County Jail?
Yes.
Or state prison?
Jail, yeah.
Jail.
Yeah.
That's outside our purview.
Okay.
So our program is for calls that we respond to currently on the street, and we're dealing with them. I know that one of our goals is also to look at diversionary programs when we're looking at mental health issues and there's a crime that's been committed. If we can track them through a diversionary program, that would be a great way for us to go.
Very well. Agadella.
When do you expect the first units to start their shifts, to start their patrols?
Great question. So our biggest challenge right now, and so if anybody's watching, we are in the process of trying to find licensed clinical workers, either mental health professionals or licensed clinical social workers, to come on board. And as soon as I can get those 4 clinicians hired, we are ready to go. City contract has been approved by City Council. We have all the pieces in place to do so, already have the officers in place. The officers are already starting to go out on some of the calls. Of course, we don't have the clinician piece of it yet. but the unit is up and running, and we are starting to make some contact on the initial calls, as well as we're doing some follow-ups. And Dr. Thompson is going out on some of the follow-ups as well at this point. You're welcome, sir.
Repeat just the hours and the days.
Yes, ma'am. So currently, we're going to run our program on 10-hour shifts. So we'll have an officer Monday through Thursday from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. And then we'll have another officer Monday through Thursday working from 1 p.m. till 11 p.m., which is really the heart of so we looked at all the statistical data on when the calls come in, and that covers the bulk of them, right? So that's our goal. And then we'll have another officer working Tuesday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and Tuesday through Friday from 1 p.m. till 11 p.m. So we'll have, that's our 4 units.
Adults and children.
I'm sorry, ma'am?
I'm so sorry. Adults and teenagers.
Yes, we can
I'm going to say
respond.
adults, children,
We will
teenagers.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I apologize.
Adults, teenagers,
Yes, ma'am.
children.
Yeah, we're not limited to an age demographic. If a call comes out and involves a mental health type call, then we will respond out to it, and we will triage it, and we will handle it. Yes,
And I particularly was thinking of some of the trafficking victims as well, which actually have both of those situations. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Sounds like a very great program. I definitely wish you the best. Definitely going to monitor the success of that program. And again, wish you the best with it. Any other further questions?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next on the agenda, item H, CRB staff reports and business. If you will, Mr. Brody, we received notification in reference to the NAACP representative nominee. If you can elaborate a little bit on our responsibility and participation in that.
Yes, I can give you an update. Actually, it was just yesterday. Yesterday we sent a letter to the president of NAACP requesting that she coordinate with her organization to nominate an individual to be sent to the mayor, who is the final approver of the position that's available. And subsequent to the mayor's approval, the city council would also approve. So starting yesterday, the president of NAACP has started the process, I believe, of choosing an individual to join the board. As you know, pursuant to the new standards that we put in place, it is there's some high standards to be able to be a member of the board, and that'll be part of the process that she'll have to undertake in terms of choosing a person. But that has begun, and you'll also have another member also who will be coming from being chosen by the city council, and that process is beginning also. The council members have been, or at least the chair of the council has been informed that that duty is upon them, and that there are steps will be taken to get that done. So you'll have 2 new members, one who's nominated by the NAACP and then approved by the mayor, and then you'll have a second member who is approved by the city council. And our goal is to have those members definitely in as soon as possible, but no later than the first meeting of 2022.
Under the new ordinance, do members of the current board are able to add in suggestion or recommendations in reference to the representative nominee for the NAACP member?
The ordinance is actually silent on that, which means that if it doesn't prohibit you from making some recommendations if you want to.
Any questions in reference to the new members that will be joining the board under the new ordinance? But, no.
I had a question, but not on that.
Go ahead with your question.
Mine was on the new ordinance as well. And I just wanted to ask a question when I kind of reviewed over it. It was asking about our meetings that we would go out into the community, the quarterly meetings, and that's going to be 2022, is that correct?
Correct. That'll start
Okay.
in 2022. So, yes, we'll have to work on doing scheduling for next year because you'll have those 4 meetings that are out in the community. And when we reviewed the ordinance again, that there's 2 meetings that you're supposed to have. They're really training meetings with TPD. So when we prepare the schedule for 2022, we'll have all those factored in. And that will begin the process of our new board schedule.
Okay, and I just was asking that because I would love to see those meetings pushed a little further down for 2 reasons. One is to make sure that we are over this pandemic as much as possible before we go to the community, and we don't put the staff as well as ourselves in harm's way. And the second reason was, it indicated in there in parentheses, I think I saw that, I wrote it down, meeting off-sites will not be televised.
Correct.
And since we know that that would be a hindrance to do that for 4 meetings, we wanted to ask if they're not televised, is there any way that that meeting is going to be captured, recording, taped, whatever?
Yeah, man. Well, we're required by state law to have a record of the meeting. The way we'll maintain the record, I don't know if we've decided that yet. We just know that we're not going to be able to use CCTV like we do right now when we're in this chambers.
Okay, it's nice if we could just video.
Well, we'll work on that.
Yeah, I'm sure the city council will work with us on get a videographer to go out to 4 meetings, right? Right.
It's not in the budget, Carolyn.
No, I said, no, city council, and he's shaking his head, right?
Who's got a smartphone?
Any other questions for Mr. Attorney Carl Brody in reference to item H, CRB staff reports and business? Thank you.
Thanks.
Captain Schoolmeister, anything to share in reference to item H, CRB staff reports of business?
Did we skip over G2?
Mike Schmidt? G2.
Just asking.
I heard
You
Dr.
can.
Collins mention item G2. I do believe Captain Schoolmeisters mentioned that earlier, right? So I think that's been covered already. But with regards to anything from my end, I just want to introduce Lieutenant Kim Hill, who's here. She will be the person that will be working with you on the TPD interview panel for the member who is picked. Obviously, we're going to talk about in the future how we're going to rotate you on and off. Dr. Collins is the first volunteer of this panel. And so for now, tonight's, I'd just like to introduce you to Lieutenant Kim Hill.
Welcome.
Good evening. Like he said, I'm Lieutenant Kimberly Hill. I'm assigned to the Support Services Division. And I think I've been before all of you before, but I really just stopped in tonight, say hi, and bring Dr. Collins her book. We briefly talked about it over the phone, so it's late. I will not keep your time. But next month, like Mike said, I will be back. And I'm looking forward to talking to you guys about the process, how it's going to work, how it's going to look, and making sure that all of you have our policies, procedures, hiring standards. So you're not just there, you're actually fully understanding what you're looking at, what you're looking for in the applicants, and what we're looking for as a department. So I look forward to seeing you all next month. Any questions for me?
That's good.
We'll hold them to next month. I'm pretty sure get all the information first.
Chair.
You got
Thank
that? You're welcome.
Actually, going back to the agenda, item G, bullet point 2, the report on the Tampa Police Department Quality Assurance Report. We spoke about it briefly in one of the cases we reviewed, and I believe everyone received a copy of that report as well. Do we need to have any further dialogue or any questions in reference to the material that you received in reference to the quality assurance report that was sent out?
I think you told us. I would just like to commend the TPD and Sonia Wise. It's a very good, thorough report. Thanks.
We'll now continue with the agenda under item I, announcements for the next meeting. The next meeting will be held on the fourth Tuesday of the month of August, which will fall on August 24th, 2021, here at the Old City Hall of 315 East Kennedy Boulevard, Tampa, Florida 33602, third floor at 6 p.m. Board members, for any reason you're unable to attend the next meeting, please notify our city clerk, Ms. Mercer, at least 48 hours in advance so we can ensure a voting quorum. Before I adjourn this meeting, I would like to give the opportunity to any board member of any final comments or statements at this time. There you go.
I don't have any, but I just wanted to acknowledge that we do have city council here, and it is a pleasure to make sure that we have the city council here meeting with us and monitoring us and giving us input. Thank you so much. I don't know if he wants comments, but good.
I want to comment every single time. Any other further comments from the board and final statements?
So y'all won't kill me, but we should acknowledge the fact that Chief Dugan is retiring. And I would like to request that the new interim chief come to see us possibly in our next meeting. I won't be here, but it would be really nice for us to get to meet and interact with the new chief, whether it's the next meeting or the following, whichever one. That way he would know us and we would know him.
I'm sure he will heard the invitation. I'm sure he probably has a long list
I know
of
he's
things-
watching us right
long
now.
list of
He is
things to
sitting
do.
at home
But,
with City of Tampa
invitation
TV
is
on, glued to us. I'm sure of that.
any other
Thank
final
you.
comments or statements from any of our board members?
Ditto on Chief Dugan.
The Citizen Review Board is now adjourned.
Ms. Mercer, I will not wait for the next meeting. God willing.
I've seen it before, but, so your point is, well, if it's a different bank,